Welcome back to the Engineered Angler and part 2 of turning this one part twitch bait into an endless swim bait. In part 1, we drew out what we wanted to make. We made some castings of the original lure, and then we decided where we needed to cut it, and we made those cuts. Then we had to shape it down to have it be a nice, consistent shape. We designed our hinge joints and then got them shaped in so that they would fit together. We got the hinge slots cut in and then installed all the hardware, and then finally gave it a clear coat and set it to dry in the chamber. And with those 3 pieces clear coated and out of the chamber, it was time to embed them in clay and make a mold box so we can make our mold. I first make a mold box out of Lego blocks and fill it up with clay. This is sulfur-free clay. Then I dig out underneath the parts so that I can embed them down halfway down the thickness of the body. I add those pins so we can form out the hinge holes and the sprues on top. And then finally the vents. After all the hardware is in, we can form the keys. This will hold the 2 parts of the mold together evenly. If you haven't made a bunch of molds, I would pause the video right here and take a close look on how I arranged these vents. All those little vertical pieces that are going up, I used solder to make those. And I think if you stare at it long enough, you'll realize why I put all those in. So now it's time to build up the box. So what I'm looking for is about 1/4 inch of wall thickness for the top of the mold. That's about 6 millimeters. So one of the reasons I left the mold making for the second part of the video is that I was running so low on my silicone that I wasn't really going to be able to pour the whole thing with the little bit that I had left. And this is that Granny Doreen silicone that I tested and really liked on a video, but some of you guys have already pointed out that this stuff is no longer available. I guess I'll have to take it off the Amazon store, but I went ahead and bought this runner-up. It isn't quite as inexpensive, but it looks to be pretty good. And the only drawback for me, at least, is that it's platinum cure, and I don't really like the platinum cure that much. The common wisdom is that the platinum cure is better because it lasts longer as a mold on the shelf, but I haven't found a big difference. And the ease of use of the tin cure just overrides any extra length of life on these things. I get a lot of folks asking me for a little bit of help because they're having problems with their silicone setting up correctly. And if you're using platinum cure silicone, this is probably why. And this one actually comes with a nice little list of things not to use with your platinum cure silicone. So number 1, you can't have clay that has sulfur in it, so it has to be sulfur-free clay. You can't have it come in contact with tin. So if you're using metal tools that maybe have some tin in it, that can actually contaminate this stuff. And if you've used some stirring sticks or any other tools that you've used on tin cure, you're going to contaminate it too. And they list a few other things that can actually contaminate it and inhibit curing. So they talk about tin, sulfur, nitrogen, phosphorus, lead, mercury, and arsenic. Not that we have a whole lot of arsenic around, but anything that could be contaminated with those materials. And it doesn't take much to end up with a mold that doesn't really set up well, ends up with a kind of a sticky surface. But because I'm always searching for the most bang for the buck, and ironically platinum now is the best price I can find, the tin cure is just a little more expensive. Here's the real kicker though. At the very bottom it tells you that it's also sensitive to UV cured resin. And that means that if you're doing what I do, which is giving that master a thin coat of UV resin just to give it a glossy finish, you might have a problem with this stuff. So what I've done, I've taken that spare head that I had and I gave it a little thin coat of UV resin, and we're gonna mix a little of this stuff and pour it in here and see if it cures. So the stuff is made by BB Dino. I'm not affiliated with them, they're not sponsoring me or anything. I paid for this stuff, and they ask you to mix it by volume, so let's do that. So I'm gonna mix it in one of these volumetric little cups. And we'll be mixing right at 25 milliliters. So 3 minutes of mixing I've found to be like the magic number. And 3 minutes is a long time actually. Alright, let's pour it on there. I don't really care about bubbles. I just care whether it actually sets up or not. Remember, we're testing both the surface of the lure with the UV resin on it and this clay. Alright, let's see what we end up with in a few hours. Alright, it's been about 5 hours, so take a look at it. Looks really solid, feels really solid, no tackiness to it at all. Looks really nice. Let's pull it off this clay and see what it looks like. All right, let's see. Hopefully it's not all tacky next to where the clay is. That's my real worry, but it feels good. It's a little tacky right where it was up against the clay, but up against the UV, no issue at all. We're probably gonna have to give this a little more time to set up after it's been in contact with the clay. All right, let's go ahead and figure out what the volume is that we're gonna need of that silicone. So it's as simple as just measuring the dimensions of the box. So it's 6.3 centimeters wide, 14.4 centimeters long, and 1.5 centimeters deep. Just to be sure I don't mix too little, I'm gonna ignore the volume of the lure and the volume of the little position keys I embedded in there, and we'll just mix the full volume of the box, which is right at 136 cubic centimeters, so 136 milliliters. And here's a quick technique for marking a volume on your cup. Put it on your scale and measure in grams how many milliliters you want. So I want 68 milliliters, so I'm gonna measure out 68 grams of water. Of course, I zeroed the scale with the cup on it. All right, and that's pretty doggone close. So what I'll do now is just mark it with a Sharpie on the outside, and I should be able to see that mark on the inside. And a little flashlight will help you find that line. Now I'll bring it up to 136 grams because that's the total volume of the silicone that I want to mix. And again, that's close enough. And I'll do the same thing and mark this level the same way. All right, now I'm just gonna pour out the water and dry it out really good. And we'll have our marks for part A and part B. All right, now it should be easy enough to go ahead and pour this up to the line. There you go. And then I'll pour the second part up to the second line. And now it's just a matter of getting this mixed up really well. And remember, 3 minutes is the magic number. And always scrape the cup and your mixing tool. I'll get back to you when we're ready to pour. All right, so the first step in pouring this stuff is to put a very thin coat on each one of the lure surface. I do that to prevent any bubbles. The only bubbles I care about in the silicone are the ones that are up against the body of the lure. And once I'm feeling pretty certain that I've got all the surfaces covered without any bubbles, I can start pouring. And I'll start from one corner and just slowly drizzle it in so it spreads over the whole mold box. It looks like we got our calculations pretty close. Not much waste. Now it's a matter of waiting. All right, it's a new day, and this stuff looks really good, and it looked this good in just probably 4 hours. Now, the only thing that has me worried is the part of our test that was in contact with the clay is still tacky, and that's not a good thing. So hopefully we'll still be able to use this. Let's just pull the clay off and find out. The silicone is a little bit tacky, not as bad as the other one was. So I think we're gonna be able to use this. I'll just give it a good coat of Vaseline before we pour that next one. But anyway, this isn't too bad. I'm feeling pretty confident that we can actually get this done. And I'm just gonna wipe down the surfaces I can get to with some alcohol. Any loose pieces I'll take out too. The important part is the surfaces of the actual lure pieces. You want them to be clean and free of any chunks of clay for sure. All right, now I'm gonna take some Vaseline and just coat all the silicone. You have to be really thorough to coat all the silicone, but you don't want to coat your lure because it'll end up putting a bunch of streaks on it and that'll show through on your casting. All right, I've got it prepared. It's all Vaselined and I can still use my original measuring cup. Still has my marks on it and it's nice and cleaned out. All right, I've got the mold box more or less level and we're ready to mix. So I'm going to stir for 3 minutes and then we'll do the same thing. We'll give it a light coating on the outside of the lure and then we'll pour the whole thing. Just made it. All right, so basically now it's just a matter of waiting. Hopefully by 6 p.m. tonight, we'll be able to make our first lures. The little bit that's left in there, look how elastic this stuff is. And it's definitely set up enough to come right out. So let's see what we got. And this is a matter of just prying this apart. Good sign that it doesn't stick to these blocks. All right, you can see the 3 sprues. Let's see if we did a good job with the Vaseline. So far, so good. Yep. All right, I think it's gonna work. Beautiful. All right, and the surface is set. All right, it didn't react with the clay at all, so we're looking good. All right, that looks really nice. So I told you I'd get to weight and balance, and this is the time. So it's pretty simple to balance one of these lures, and weighting is going to be dependent on what you want from it. I want a moderately sinking lure. I don't want it to float in salt water, so I always have to get it to sink kind of quick in fresh water. So that's what I'm going to be shooting for, and I won't be able to discern how much weight to put in it until I know the volume of each one of these pieces, and we'll do that in a minute. But typically what you want to do is put the weight down as low as possible on each one of these pieces, and make sure that you weight the pieces so each of them behaves the same way independently. So if you want the whole lure to sink slowly, you also want each piece to sink slowly. The only tricky part is how to include your hardware in the calculation. So since you're gonna have a hinge pin right here, and another one over here, and you also have the hinge eye here, you have to decide how you're gonna share the weight of this stuff. My rule of thumb is that if it's embedded in the piece, then it belongs to the piece. So this hinge pin will be part of the weight of the centerpiece. This hinge pin will be part of the weight of the tail, and then the hinge eyes are part of whatever they are embedded in. I'm sure everybody out there has their own little technique that works for them, but this is what I do. All right, to get the volume of the separate pieces, we'll need a container of water, and we'll turn on our scale with the water on it so it reads 0 with the water on it. Now we submerge the piece without touching the sides or the bottom, and we read the weight, 7.12 grams. Now the middle piece, make sure it's fully submerged and make sure you didn't capture any bubbles. So it's 9.52, and then finally the tail. I like to shake it a little bit to get the bubbles off, 8.53. So these are the weights of the separate sections in the water. Now what that means is that that's the amount of weight of the water that was displaced by that piece of the lure. And since water weighs 1 gram per cubic centimeter, that also is the volume of those segments of the lure. But you don't really have to understand all that. What you need to remember is that this weight, that is the minimal amount of weight that segment of the lure needs to be perfectly suspending. But we don't want it to be suspending. So I want it to be sinking, moderately sinking, like maybe slow to medium sinking. And to achieve that, what I like to do is add 10% to the weight of the lure in the water. And that'll give us the target weight for that section of the lure. So I'll take 7.12, multiply it times 1.1, and you get 7.83 grams. And I'll do the same thing for the other two. All right, now we have our target weights. What we need to do now is start weighing the hardware and the lure segment and see how much is left for us to make up with a little bit of counterweight. And I've already done a bunch of work creating all those twisted pieces of hardware we're gonna need for the inside of this thing. So at this stage, what we're gonna do is weigh all the components. So I've taken the segments of the lure and taken those temporary eyes out of it, because that's not going to be part of the lure in the end. And this little piece of twisted hardware is going to be the hinge eye, and this will be the twist eye for the tie-on eye, and we get 5.39 grams. There won't be a hook attached to this or anything, so that's all the hardware we need. Our target is 7.83, so I'll put this little split shot here, and we got 7.97. That's pretty doggone close. I'd rather have it be a little heavy than a little too light. The midsection will be carrying a hook and a split ring. This will be the combination hinge pin and hook eye. This will be our hinge eye. And we got 8.68 grams, and our target weight is 10.47. So I'll drop this little split shot on here, and we got 10.96. That's a little bit over, but I'd rather have it be an extra half a gram over than half a gram under. The tail is also going to carry a hook, a split ring. It's going to have just a regular stainless steel hinge pin. This twist eye will be embedded and will be the tail hook eye, and that weighs 8.36. Our target is 9.38. That little split shot gets us to 9.51. So everything's just a little heavier. I'd rather have it sink a little faster than not sink enough. I'm using the hinge eyes as mounts for my weights. The tie-on eye is embedded in there and will be cast with it. And I did the same thing back here. And the only difference back here is that this tie-on eye is twisted out of some thinner wire, the same as this front one. And I've got the big T on it, so it supports itself and I can put that weight in there. These two pins are there to form the hinge pin hole. So when we're done, we should be able to just throw this thing together pretty quickly. All right, let's go ahead and cast this lure. All right, it's been 15 minutes. Feels nice and hard, and you can actually see through this and see the segment, and that feels hard too. So while it's still kind of warm, I'm anxious to see what it looks like inside. My biggest fear is that we end up with hardware that's shifted, and if that happens, then we're gonna have to figure out a way to anchor those things down. But let's open it up. Let's not solve any problems that we don't have yet. All right, looks like we got a good pour. I was expecting some flash, since all that hardware is just laying in between the two halves of the mold. All right, let's pull these things out. Looks like the vents worked pretty well. No, it really did cast really nicely. Pretty happy with that. The next challenge is to see if these pins will come out. I did coat them with Vaseline, so hopefully they're turning. Oh yeah, no problem. Sweet. And the casting is nice enough that I can almost clean it completely with my fingers. It looks pretty nice. Pull this pin out. Oh yeah. All right, and then the hardware that sticks out, it just gets cut off with a little Dremel tool. So there's a little work to be done. Let me finish cleaning it up, and then we'll assemble it and see how quickly it sinks in that test tank. All right, put the pins in it, and it's assembled, and it's acting just like it's supposed to. So I'm gonna hang the hooks on it, and we'll drop it in the water and see how it sinks. All right, let's see how it goes. Perfect, perfect. Let's see if it still sinks. Just barely. That's usually how I like it, because that ensures that this thing's going to sink in salt water and fresh water. All right, let's try it as a two-part. Let's see if our calculations still hold true. All right, perfect. All right, I'm happy with that. I'm going to make at least 3, maybe 4 of these, but I'm going to make a bunch of extra of the centerpieces. This way I can extend them out and make a nice long one. We can do a test to see how the action changes with the length of the lure. So this is a good time for the question of the week. Every week I select a question out of the comments from you guys, and this week's question is about what spray chrome product works the best. So if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that I've done a bunch of videos testing spray chrome products and just seeing how easy they are to apply, how good a finish you get, and how well they hold up to clear coating. And I've been testing spray chrome ever since I actually knew it existed, probably 8 years ago. The first stuff I tested was this stuff, the Super Chrome, and it worked well, just like most all of them did. You end up with an initial nice shiny chrome finish, but then if you want to protect it, you got to clear coat it. And if you clear coat it, it kind of dulls out. And it dulls out at different grades. Some of them go completely gray and dull. Others retain a lot of reflectivity but still don't have that real chrome sharpness. So to give you the most useful answer to this question, I think I have to take into consideration how easy it is to apply, how expensive it is, and how much of a chrome finish it actually retains after clear coating. And just to jump straight to the answer, I think Spastic is really the best bang for your buck. It comes ready to spray, it's easy to put on, you actually can give it a light buffing and polish it out just a little bit after it's set. And then if you use this stuff, an acrylic floor wax, make sure you don't have one that has any cleansers in it. It actually retains a lot of its nice crisp chrome look. And just to show you what that looks like, here's a spoon that was finished with Spastics and clear coated with floor wax. But to be totally honest, my absolute favorite, of course, is the silver plating, but it also is the most complicated one to put on. And while the cost per lure is pretty low, the cost of actually getting into it and getting going with silver plating is a little expensive. You probably have to invest at least $200 to get started. While Spastics, I think, runs around 14 bucks, and you can do probably 25 to 30 lures out of that one little jar. And I really have done a ton of work using these spoons and tested a lot of products. And if you're interested in seeing those videos, I'll go ahead and put those video links in the description. All right, so I've got some of these parts put together, and I have to say I'm pretty happy and especially surprised at this little 2-piece that has a nice little wiggle to it. But of course, our original concept 3-piece, expanding it to a 4-piece, and even further to a 5-piece. And I'm excited to see what these things do in the water. And I think we can make like a 9-part lure, and we'll see what it does in the water. So the next moment we have a little sunshine, we'll head to the lake. All right, so we're out on the lake. I brought the kit. Unfortunately, it's gone overcast on us, but we really don't have any other choice. We've got to do it today. This morning is Thursday morning, and the video will air tomorrow morning, Friday at 6:30. So I got to get this filmed, edited, and uploaded onto YouTube. So let's start with the little 2-piece. I'm hoping we can get both surface shots and underwater shots. So the sink rate is pretty nice and it sinks nice and straight. All right, let's see what it looks like on a retrieve. Looking good. It's a funny little movement, kind of twitchy. Even at a pretty good clip, seems to retrieve nice and straight. I'm happy with that. This thing is going to be a killer. I really want to use this for speckled trout out in the Gulf of Mexico. Oh yeah, that thing works nice. No problem with the fast retrieve. That thing works nice. Got to start thinking about what kind of color patterns we're going to put on these things. All right, presto changeo. It's 3 pieces. Look at that. What a nice action. Super nice. Super nice. Look at that. Look at the way it waves its tail. Oh my goodness. That is awesome. I'm totally stoked. These things are going to kill. And presto changeo, we got 4. Still looking awesome. Still has a really wide wobble. Very surprising. And on a more brisk retrieve, still looking pretty stable. All right, there it is. 5 pieces. Starting to get a little heavy. See what it looks like on a retrieve. Oh my, look at that. Ha, it looks like a snake. That hinge arrangement really forces a big movement. Look at that. That is just absolutely perfect. Let's go to 6. I think a 3rd hook is in order, so I put one on. Let's try this one. All right, let's try the retrieve. Look at that. You really can't ask for more than that. Look at that. Bring it back really on a good brisk retrieve. Look at that. It wakes and just is steady as a rock all the way back. I think I could make this thing 10 pieces easy and still have it be functional, but it weighs a ton. There it is. 8 freaking pieces. Let's see what it looks like. Beautiful. Looking really good. A fast retrieve. Really good. Pretty happy with that. Can't ask for much more than that at all. So much can go wrong when you're making a lure like this, but this really did turn out to be the endless swim bait. So I'm going to do some underwater shots now. The sun came out a little bit. I'm hoping the sun penetrates the water a little bit, and I'll put that as an encore at the end of the video, and you'll have to wait to see which one I actually do. But if you're enjoying this stuff, let me know in the comments. Give me a thumbs up. It really does help grow the channel. Let me know what else you'd like to see on the channel, and subscribe, doggone it. I'll see you guys next Friday.